Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. This is fairly mild and dry for the next few days, but as we head into early next week, towards the middle of the week, it could turn slightly more unsettled from the west. Nothing too drastic yet, but slightly more unsettled with cooler air masses mixing in as well. Nothing particularly strange for the time of year, just generally quite mild and pretty dry in general. However, as many of you know, as we have been talking about a lot in the recent videos, we have a sudden stratospheric warming, which is pretty imminent, and we have done dedicated videos on that over the last few days and the last couple of weeks in general. So make sure you check out the video, especially from yesterday, where we had a look at it in a lot of detail. But we just got to have a look at the longer range models in the second half of the video to see, will that sudden stratospheric warming change our weather patterns towards the end of the month? Will it produce more substantial blocking, and could it turn us a lot colder? We've got to keep an eye on the extended range at the moment to see if we can start to see those hints pushing through. Now, some of the operational runs are generally not picking up on any major blocking yet, but the ensemble members, which have got a bigger range, definitely are seeing a trend of colder runs, a cluster starting to appear around the last week of February, with temperatures down towards freezing in the day, things like that, on some of the ensemble members. So we'll be seeing that in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So to start on the live radar, you can see it is a very dry day, as I'm recording this around 2 PM, very little precipitation around, a bit of drizzle in the north through Scotland. And this is because we've got this big area of high pressure over the top of us, and you can see most of northwest Europe is dry as well. Now I've put on the temperatures as of around 2 PM. You can see that we are generally with a sort of a yellowy colour, which is temperatures around the low teens, 10 to 12 degrees. Warmest or mildest further eastwards, with the wind direction coming from the south-southwest, a bit of a Föhn effect going on over the hills through central areas, giving warmer air and warmer temperatures further northwards and eastwards. Again, pretty mild for the time of year, good 5 degrees above average, and it's all because our air is being drawn up well to the south of us. And that will continue for the next few days before eventually the winds will veer more westerly and it will start to turn it a little bit cooler, but again, nothing majorly cold for the time of year. Anything a lot colder, we're going to have to be waiting at least another week or two, where there are signs, as I said, as a result perhaps of the MJO phase that we did touch on yesterday, and the sudden stratospheric warming of bunching us colder perhaps towards the end of the month into the start of March. So if you do now head over to the UKV and have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, you can see it's generally a pretty cloudy day. There will be some breaks in the cloud, but again, nothing too substantial. A relatively dry day though, which is probably the most important thing. As we head through this evening into tomorrow, you can see that it remains fairly dry, a few patches of showers here or there, but generally tomorrow another dry day, but perhaps some more breaks in the sunshine. Again, the temperatures very similar today, but we'll have a look at those in a minute. Beyond that, into Monday, again very similar, but even sunnier, with a lot of breaks in the cloud and quite clear skies for many central, northern and western areas. The far east and the far south may have some lingering cloud, but again, nothing too thick. As we head into Tuesday, as I said, the wind direction starts to change, more westerly wind, and that will introduce more showers and cloud into Tuesday, but mainly for western areas, for it does try to trend more widespread through Wednesday and into Thursday as well. So all areas will start to see thicker cloud, perhaps cooler temperatures, and the risk of some precipitation, but here nothing too significant yet, as we still have that high pressure to our south and our east trying to hold back the weather fronts, so they will be diminishing in strength as they progress in, but it should still generally be pretty decent out there. Maybe later next week it could turn a bit more unsettled, as we'll see in the longer range runs in a minute. So if you do now put on the temperatures, and you can see as of this afternoon at around 2-3 PM, it's around 10 to 12 degrees. Pretty decent for the time of year. Nothing amazingly mild, but nothing particularly cold into the first half of February. overnight tonight, temperatures are very mild, mid to high single digits, and into tomorrow, those temperatures very similar, around that 8 to 10 degree mark, maybe slightly higher, 11 or 12 in a few spots. Again, does depend on cloud amounts and things like that. Beyond that, into Monday, overnight temperatures dropping down a little bit cooler, mid to low single digits for some, but again, nothing spectacularly cold. And into Monday afternoon, widely 10 to 12 degrees, slightly cooler further northwards. Into Tuesday, temperatures dropping away a bit lower as well, 2 to 4 degrees, and into Tuesday afternoon, once again, 10 to 12 degrees. A bit of a milder sector pushing through there, but cooler sectors will be following that. And you can see into Wednesday, mild in the south and east, 12, 13, further northwards, maybe mid to high single digits, so a little bit cooler, and that does turn more widely into the early hours of Thursday, with cooler upper temperatures coming in, and meaning those temperatures overnight dropping down to the low single digits. So definitely turning a bit more changeable into the middle of next week and later next week. But again, nothing too extreme, nothing really substantially different from what we should expect for this time of year. Probably actually still on the milder side generally for the middle of February. But if we do now go over to longer range, we'll first go over and have a look at the zonal mean winds. Again, this is something we don't normally look at in our daily videos, but because we've got the sudden stratospheric warming going on, I do want to have a look at this in most videos, just so we can see the progression of the stratospheric warming through the atmosphere. So again, I've showed these charts quite a lot on the videos we have covered the stratosphere. So most of you should know what these are showing, but I'll briefly explain it once again. On the left-hand side, we've got the actual mean winds through the atmosphere at 60 degrees. So again, that is just to the north of the UK, where we should generally have the polar vortex. And it should have very strong westerly winds. We should be seeing oranges and reds on this chart high up in the stratosphere. Again, it would be better if we were able to see what this was like before a sudden stratospheric warming, but it should generally be in this yellowy, orangey, red colour. And lower down in the atmosphere, it should generally still be westerly as well, because that is our prevailing wind, but it will be weaker, of course. Now you can see here, huge blue purples, and you can get towards black there, off the scale, weak winds there into the negative territory at 60 degrees to the north. Again, remember, this is not right over the North Pole. Right over the North Pole, it is a lot slower, again, being towards the centre of the polar vortex. The outer edges are faster travelling longer directions, longer distances, of course. But as we propagate through the atmosphere, you can see not too much change as of yet. But of course, if we look to the right-hand chart, this is showing the anomalies, so the change from normal. Up in the stratosphere, it's around 70 metres per second slower than normal. But we need to see these blues propagate through the atmosphere, and you can see for the next week or two, we remain in the red territory, or slightly orange territory. And that's why, as we'll see in the long-range runs in a minute, we're not seeing too many impacts as of yet. But right in the extended range, we start to see a little bit of a negative territory starting to appear towards the surface level. So different pressure levels. So perhaps signs from this latest GFS run, the 6 o'clock run, that it could just about be propagating through the atmosphere towards the last couple of days of February, but we'll need to see this shore up on the next few runs before we can say anything for certain. But I would keep this chart updated over the next few days, just to see if we do see these blue anomalies trend down into the troposphere. At the moment, they're staying just up in the stratosphere, maybe right to the top of the troposphere, but not really progressing down as much yet. But we are just seeing hints of blues there right in the extended range in around 15 days time. So we'll have to see how that does develop. But if we do actually go to the raw GFS pressure chart, and see what that is showing over the course of the next couple of weeks. Again, you can see high pressure over the top of us at the moment, quite a strong area of high pressure, and that's why we're giving these southerly winds dry and turning sunnier as we see drier air push up from the south. Beyond that, though, into next week, we do see more of a westerly influence, still higher pressure and control in the south, which will mean it'll be drier, but beyond that, it does go more unsettled with more westerly flows. Again, the jet stream is over the top of us, if not over sort of Scotland, so it will generally be drier in the south, more unsettled and cooler in the north, but it won't be it won't be exactly like that. There will be periods of cooler weather and precipitation in the south, but nothing too extreme yet. And you can see into the longer range, we actually go very unsettled. Perhaps a bit of a northerly blast there, so slightly colder air pushing in. And into the longer range, we actually see really strong low pressure move in. Again, we'd expect when the southern stratospheric warming propagates through, we'd expect if it was going to make a big impact in the troposphere, these purple colours would be dispersed and significantly weakened. Now, in this run, we are seeing some blocking appearing, but it's on the other side of the pole. Again, we can't say for certain whether this is effects of the southern stratospheric warming or just an Arctic high developing. We'll have to just wait for the next few runs and the next few days in general to see how this does progress. But if we did see blocking like this, but not see these blues and purples get dispersed, then the southern stratospheric warming probably wouldn't affect us all too much. But of course, as I said, we'll have to see what happens. At this stage, no real impacts as of to the 27th, but I must stress anything beyond day 10 is very much uncertain, so we'll have to see how it does develop. Again, got to keep an eye on what is going on through the atmosphere over the next few days to see whether we actually do see that blocking propagate through. Perhaps small hints here, but nothing too directly impacting the UK as of yet. If we do look at the GEM, see how that does compare. If we go to the pressure charts here, again, high pressure over the top of us as we progress through this week. Again, generally staying in a westerly flow, perhaps more unsettled even as soon as next Friday, quite widely as well, with quite a vigorous low there. Could be some very strong gusty winds and maybe some quite heavy rain with that. Beyond that, we stay relatively unsettled with some lows diving a little bit there to our south and briefly putting in easterly winds, but again, nothing particularly cold before high pressure does topple back over us. So again, nothing too substantial there. A little bit more unsettled there, at least in the shorter term than the GFS was showing, but it actually does settle it down a little bit again in around 8 to 10 days time. So again, nothing too substantial from the GEM there. No real signs of any impacts from the southern stratospheric warming as of yet. And just generally keeping us relatively mild, relatively settled at least for the start and the end of the run, with a few days of more unsettled, perhaps even stormier weather towards the end of this coming working week. If we do look at the ECMWF, see how that does compare. If we do just quickly refresh it, we can see that we have got high pressure over the top of us at the moment. A westerly flow is going to be trying to push in over the course of the coming days. Again, nothing too substantial as of yet, but could be some small little vigorous lows there, giving some heavier rain. And right towards day 10, high pressure over the south, lower pressure further northwards. Again, a classic westerly flow, and you're going to look at the northern hemisphere view. No substantial blocking yet, a very strong tropospheric polar vortex, in fact. We've got a lot of cold air there. If we put on the upper air temperatures, a lot of cold air enveloped within that. We need to see this budged if we were going to get any cold weather from the southern stratospheric warming. So again, that is what we've got to keep our eyes on. Where does all this cold air go? And if it gets budged at all, really, by the higher pressure and the warming propagating through the atmosphere. But remember, these are all operational runs. They're run once every 6 hours, and they only really show one scenario, and sometimes can lead and can get things slightly more accurate than other ensemble runs because they are run at a higher resolution, so it can pick up on smaller details more. But we always have to look, when we've got something like this, like a sudden stratospheric warming, that is very confusing. That is going to put a spanner in the works for the general atmospheric flow. We have to look at the ensembles. And the ensembles, if we have a look at the latest GFS ensembles, are telling a very mixed picture towards the end of the month. Now you can see it's generally mild and fairly dry for the next week to 10 days. However, into the last week of February, trending much more towards average with quite a considerable number of runs down to the -5 to -10 region. Again, nothing too out of the ordinary. We expect to see colder runs because it is winter, but this trend coinciding with the MJO going into phase 6, 7 and 8, and of course the southern stratospheric warming propagating through, could it be signs that some ensemble members are picking up on that warming propagating through the atmosphere faster than others, or picking up on it whereas others not at all? That could be a scenario, and we'll have to see exactly how it does play out. So yes, the 3 operational runs really not producing anything particularly cold at all. In the next 10 days for the GM, the ECMWF, and the GFS, really not much at all. Out to 14 days either. But ensemble members are picking up on something, and we'll have to keep an eye on what they do develop. Again, if we look at the sea level pressure, this big telltale sign that is very uncertain in the long term. You've got some ensemble members with pressure very high, around 1030 or 1040, others a lot lower, down to 980. So again, huge dispersion. Again, you'd expect that in the longer term, but very big dispersion, again suggesting that we haven't got a clue exactly what could happen. Again, those with lower pressure, more likely to be westerly. Those with higher pressure, more likely to involve more blocking, probably cooler weather, whether that is in terms of a sort of a high pressure over top of us, an inversion, or actual northern blocking propagating through. So we'll have to see. And again, the dew point's an important data point to look at. You can see trending cooler in the longer term, down towards freezing. Again, symbolic of colder, drier, either continental or Arctic air masses pushing in, i.e. northerlies or easterly flow. Again, we'll have to see. If you finish by just looking at the ECMWF ensemble members, see what they're showing over the course of the next couple of weeks. Again, go to the midnight run, which does run out all the way to the end of the month. You can see not as much of a definitive signal here, anything a lot colder. Yes, some colder runs, but generally more average to above average. So ECMWF ensemble members not picking up on anything substantial at all, keep us average to above average, and generally pretty dry. So yeah, very interesting. GFS definitely got a bit of a cooler trend in the long term. ECMWF not picking up on anything at all. Again, just highlighting the uncertainty we do have. And of course, we did look at the ECMWF bi-weekly data dump that we do get, looking at a lot of charts, a lot of ensemble charts as well, and they were suggesting that the ECMWF operational and ensembles did think that there was going to be some more substantial blocking towards the end of the month into March. Whether that is a direct cause of the sudden stratospheric warming, or if that's to do with some other atmospheric process, we can't say for certain, but definitely that was what it's suggesting. So interesting seeing the ensembles from the midnight run here, not really whiffing at anything like that substantially at all, because if that was going to come off, you'd expect to see more colder runs appearing here. So as I said, we'll have to see what happens. It is definitely longer range, and we'll continue to touch on it. You'll probably get bored of me talking about a sudden stratospheric warming, because it is the big talking point at the moment. But it could have substantial impacts, or it could have none. Again, the most extreme scenario we could get is the beast from the east. Again, very unlikely, but it happened in 2018. A more subtle sort of scenario, more insignificant scenario is a little bit of Atlantic ridging and perhaps northwesterly winds or something like that. So it could be anywhere on that spectrum, but just because it's got those risks of very cold conditions, we really do need to keep an eye on it, just because remember how impactful the beast from the east was. If we get anything on that scale at all, or anything close to that, it will be big headlines, and we do need to make sure we can anticipate it for the foreseeable future. So we'll continue to have a look at it, of course, but for the time being, I must stress it is generally mild. It is generally dry for at least the next 5 days, and perhaps longer in the south, before turning perhaps more unsettled further northwards and more of a westerly influence, and perhaps even signs of a little bit of a storminess, perhaps, if some of these lows do get picked up by the jet stream. But again, still a good few days away, so things can change. So of course, keep you updated with everything going on, not only day to day, but of course longer range with what is going on in the stratosphere. So make sure you stay tuned and subscribe to the channel as well. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.